All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Dakot eh. Welcome to Nestan, Reconnecting Through Preservation and Promotion of Indigenous Foods. This Earth Week 2021 virtual presentation shares how Indigenous knowledge is reconnecting the Yavapai and Apache people to their homelands. This afternoon, we will focus upon Indigenous food sovereignty, and our panelists will discuss how it plays a crucial role in creating a self-sustaining tribal community for future generations. My name is Veronica Hirsch. I am Cho'ok Ananda. From my mother, I am Chiricahua Apache, and I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as your webinar moderator this afternoon. My personal passion is related to environmental science with a particular emphasis upon water, specifically Native American water rights settlement agreements. So I'm so honored to be able to learn from our esteemed panelists today who are going to be discussing their personal experiences with reinvigorating traditional foodways and reincorporating and reemphasizing the value that Indigenous foods specific to the Yavapai and Apache nations have in their personal lives, in the lives of their families, and in the important community work that they do. I first want to acknowledge the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, as well as the Sustainability Alliance. They are today's webinar event co-sponsors. And just to let you all know, today's event is one of many events that the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, or NASCA, as part of its Earth Week. Earth Day, as a quick reminder, is 2 days away on April 22nd, and globally, April 20th through the 22nd, Earth Day activities are happening all over the world. I want to let everyone know that those of you who are participating in today's event, an email at the end of the event will be sent to all of you, all of the participants, and that email will contain detailed information about all of the additional events that the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance and the Sustainability Alliance are hosting this week during this Earth Week 2021. I want to acknowledge, and if you could please share screen and show us the beautiful artwork that we have for today's event. I want to acknowledge Daniel Wheeler, who is a White Mountain Apache tribe citizen. He is the artist whose work is featured on the webinar flyer. As you can see, the title is The Garden of Life, Replanting Roots to Our Ancestors. And I just want to draw your attention to some of the important relatives that we see in this artwork. We see corn, beans, and squash, and for many tribal communities, these plant relatives are a critical part of diet. And in fact, there are stories specific to various tribal communities about the network of relationships that these plants have with each other, and then the relationships that we have as humans with these plant relatives. I also want to draw your attention to the oya, or the pot, that you see in the bottom left. A lot of times that type of oya or pot can be used for water. And again, water is a relative. We see another relative, a red-tailed hawk, who's a raptor. And a raptor is an important keystone predator. A raptor ensures that any rodent populations that might threaten, for instance, our corn relative or our bean relative, are kept in a sustainable check. So we can see just from this art that there are several examples of interconnected relationships with various relatives. And a quick note on terminology, you'll notice that I'm using the term relatives, and that is intentional. I don't mean it just as something poetic. I'm intentionally using relatives instead of the word resources, although very often in legal language, policy language, of course, we refer to water, land as resources. But I'm drawing from important research, really first collated by the Indigenous scholar Sean Wilson in his book, Research is Ceremony. And he emphasizes the 4 R's. The 4 R's are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and relationship. And so by using relatives, we can maybe replace an unintentional or even subconscious extractive mentality that's associated with that term resources, and one that might define value of those resources in monetary terms, strictly monetary terms, and replace it with one that recognizes those interconnected relationships, much like the one we see in this artwork that Mr. Wheeler provided us, those relationships that we have with our land base, whether those relationships are in our traditional homelands or in places in which we humbly live as guests. And I humbly live as a guest. I'm participating in today's webinar event, and from Chukshan or Tucson, which is part of the traditional lands of the Tanatam Nation and also current tribal lands of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. So I pay my respects to all those ancestors, current citizens, and future generations of those two Indigenous nations. And to properly begin this afternoon's discussion, I'm first going to ask Ms. Glory Lewis, a Yavapai Apache Nation citizen, to briefly introduce herself and to offer a song in the Yavapai language. And Glory, before we turn it over to you, I'd like to ask, and please make sure that you unmute yourself before you respond. If you would like us to stand, if that would be appropriate, you can let us know at this time. Thank you.
All right, Mahamka Kamuche, Yamovich Glory, Safkateva Yuichem, Yape Wacha Yuichem, Nyachitape, Edith Hanoitua, Mokam, Nyatalata, Ivan Lewis, Gin, Wahanikam. And what I said in my language, Yavapai language, is hello everyone, how are you? My name is Glory. I'm from the gray looking area they call Middle Verde and from the Yavapai Apache Nation. And this is my my beautiful daughter here, Alana Lewis. She joined me today, and we want to sing a song for you. So this song was given to me from Creator. I sang this hymn for a long time, ever since I was a young girl, and as I grew older, within the past couple years, these words came to me, and so it's Creator, thank you. Mahamka, or Yachekwa, Wahanika, and Creator, thank you, and water, aha, and you are beautiful, Yacheyivi, and Ba Japan Javi is you are healing to our people. And so as we know, like our bodies are made of water. Mother Earth, you know, the animal life, it's one of the sacred elements to life is water. And so we want to honor that and give thanks to Creator, and thank you all for being here. So we'll go ahead and begin singing this song. Okay. Thank you.
Many thanks, Glory, to you and your daughter for providing that beautiful song in the Yavapai language. And at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Twyla Cazador, a San Carlos Apache citizen, to please briefly introduce herself and to also offer a prayer in the Western Apache language. Thank you. Twyla, I just wanted to ask if it's appropriate for us to stand while you offer the prayer. If you could please let us know.
It's okay. Okay, I'm going to introduce first Danoa Daldashi Twyla Castagunde. I am from the St. Carlos Apache tribe. I am with one of our tribal members, Rachel Nolene, and she will be doing the opening prayer. Daldashi Rachel Nolene se kuri St. Carlos Apache tribe in the Shaw. Dinida Gino open a slit the prairie. Bigawit na the Gino a here general Quincy. The Gila could a Sarante. Dejo gawit na Judah Gino. Karan and Snitty Goon. Gawit na be Karan and Snee. Middle birdie gawit na that in no not at any be Karan and Sneak gawit na touch a partner that's kid, that's the kids, not yell, which is not over. Kapitawushora de nuchi be antele don't know what sa antigo in there and drink it now no what no one la di no sunny because a ginger was like it now in the conference in the because in the started editnis kai in there what because and no need a saw or a like it now need an in ego or what have ni sure one then week it now near and later ni hijo time lenida no stand leader jink it non and I hear it went non a wa no stand leader a wa no fun leader a wa wasn't saying it went non he it went non shita ero let snow the schneedy conference in dig it went non here at Jesus amen.
Ms. Nolene, thank you so much for those beautiful words of blessing. I just want to provide a quick overview for everyone who's joining us to let you know what to expect this afternoon. Each panelist is going to share her life experiences and discuss some of the food sovereignty initiatives with which she is involved, in addition to some of the challenges and opportunities that exist to support tribal efforts and traditional lifeways. There are four main goals of today's webinar event. As I mentioned, we're going to hear from those personal lived experiences from each panelist. And we're also going to discuss how certain factors, including political, environmental, and cultural aspects, play a crucial role in reconnecting each person and frankly, these two communities, this community of the Yavapai Apache Nation, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally to their land base. We're also going to identify some key areas where Indigenous knowledge, both from Yavapai Apache Nation and the knowledge that Ms. Twyla Cazador will share with us from the San Carlos Apache tribe, how that knowledge can help create change, whatever that change looks like. And lastly, we're hoping that the main takeaway is that everybody will learn some insight into some of the environmental, political, economic, and cultural challenges that have, in times past anyway, threatened tribal communities' lifeways, but really how each of the panelists has been able to successfully address that in her work. So some quick details. As I mentioned, those are the goals. We will begin with introductions from each panelist. Some of the panelists will have PowerPoint presentations. Once we have completed that portion, we're going to have 3 overall questions to the panelists. I want to remind participants that you may use the Q&A feature. That Q&A feature is located in the lower right of your screen. You might see 3 dots in the lower right and it says more. Go ahead and click on that and you'll see Q&A. If you have a question for any of the panelists, please feel free to type it in. And then I will select one question, especially if it seems to be a common one, to ask of the panelists. And I will reserve the rest, though. At the end of some of the discussion, we will have an opportunity for a closing discussion. So don't feel that, oh, my question didn't get asked. Your question is appreciated, and so we will try to make sure that that's incorporated in the closing discussion. And I encourage everybody to please stay on as much as you can. This will last approximately an hour and a half. At the very end, much like we opened with words, healing words of song and prayer, we will have a closing prayer. And at that time, I'm going to again call upon Ms. Twyla Cazador and Ms. Rachel Nolene. Quick housekeeping issues. This presentation is being recorded. It's also being streamed live on Facebook. For our panelists, please note, I will politely interrupt you when you have about a minute remaining of your time. I will use the raise hand feature. As I mentioned, we're budgeting approximately 1.5 hours for today, and that will really depend upon the momentum of the discussion. So all of you who are participating, thank you in advance for being engaged and choosing to participate in some of those discussions today. So with that, I want to turn it over to Ms. Amanda Hanwaitawa, who is a Yavapai Apache Nation citizen. Thank you, Amanda.
Yes. Maham chika gamuche nyamolech Amanda Hanwaitua Yafpe Awaja Uijam. Hello, how are you all? My name is Amanda Hanwaitua and I'm from the Yavapai Apache Nation. I am very honored to be here today on this panel amongst these inspiring women. There is a proverb that states the Native American women will bring healing back to our tribes. And I see that happening right now. And so, Hanigam, thank you for having me. I want to start my presentation by sharing a little bit about who I am and my journey to reconnecting. Next. So on the left is a picture of my great-grandfather, Scotty Ransom Wagado, and his only daughter, my grandmother, Marian Hanwaitua, both full-blooded Yavapai. My great-grandfather was an exceptional man who was able to secure his own land where he farmed, hunted wild game, and harvested the foods and medicines from the native plants. In fact, he would go along the creek that ran through our property and collect the spring greens. And when he would sit outside and tell stories about to his grandchildren, the animals would come and listen to him too. And so he was really connected and in tune, not only with the land, the plants, but also the animals. So he was just a very humble man. On the right is my grandfather, Louis Calvin Hanwaitua, who was Hopi and part Shoshone Paiute. He married my grandmother, Marian, who together raised 13 children. My grandfather was what we call a mungwi, which is a high priest. And so he was a well-respected man and carried a lot of responsibility. He was a mason who helped build a lot of the homes and was also a dry farmer. And so it's very important for me to share where I come from because my ancestors are a part of me and their teachings and their traits of strength, leadership, resiliency, service to community, and a sense of self-sufficiency has passed on to me and giving me the responsibilities that I have today. And for myself, my family, my community, my tribe, and Mother Earth. And so I feel that the more I live the way they did, the closer I am to them. And this has been really significant to my journey and reconnecting to my spirituality and the the morals and the values that I want to live by and raise my children with. Next. So after graduating from ASU, I started working at the Yavapai Apache Nation Agriculture Resource Department, which operates a farm and ranch. And so this is really where I began to learn about farming and developed a passion for growing food. One of my favorite things to do was to go out early in the morning into the field and pick the vegetables that I was going to sell either to the community or at local farmers markets. I was really proud of the work that we did because we were providing that access to fresh produce. And so I feel that when tribes have the resources like farmable land, access to water, and even funding for operations, they can grow food for their people and really create an establishment that promotes food security and self-sufficiency. Next. So seeing the process of preparing the lands, planting the seed, and watching it grow into food that was going to nourish people, it really inspired me and influenced me to want to grow food on my own. And so in 2016, me and my husband started a garden in our backyard. And it started off really simple by planting in rows the three sisters, the corn, bean, and squash. And we also had some spinach and watermelon as well. Next. And so the best thing about gardening is that it's a learning experience. And so as time passes, you learn and you learn what works and what doesn't work, and you get better. And so this is what my garden looks like today. As you can see, it's really transformed, and we are able, we grow just a variety of foods depending on the seasons. So you can see here in the spring, we'll plant kale, lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, and in the summertime will be our corn, our beans, squash, melons, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, things like that. Next. And so the backyard gardening movement is a group that I started on Facebook. And my goal was to create a space where gardeners can share their experience in hopes that it would inspire and motivate others to want to grow their own food. And so what I did was grabbed some images that were shared on the group. And so here's some of them, just really beautiful, vibrant pictures. Next. So here you can see the different types of gardens that people have. You have your raised garden beds, your rows, and bricks. Next. You have your pot gardening. Pot gardening is really good for when you have small space, and it also uses less water. And so I wanted to highlight the picture on the top right. You can see this family created a self-watering system where it waters the pots from underneath. And so, you know, we talk about creativity and innovation for water conservation. It's just amazing what we can do. Next. And so here is just some pictures of seed starting. And I wanted to highlight on the bottom left there is a family who reused their egg cartons to start their seeds. And on the top right was a father who shared with us how we can reuse our paper towel rolls and our toilet paper rolls to create little cedar cups. Next. Flowers. So not only do flowers look good and smell good, they are really beneficial to creating a biodiverse garden. So I thought that was important to include here. Next. And here are just some close-up of some pictures that were shared. You can see grapes, yellow squash, melons, strawberries, onions, okra. Next. We have mint, corn, pumpkins, cucumbers, and melons. Next. Here are some images of harvesting. I wanted to highlight at the bottom left there is actually my daughter who picked some Swiss chards for her grandmother. And so next. So more pictures of harvesting, you could just see the variety of foods that individuals grow. And I think, one of the most rewarding things about gardening is being able to harvest the food. Next. And then that would be next to, of course, eating the food, right? And so here's just some ways that others had prepared their foods. You can eat them raw, you can eat them in a salad, you can make salsa, you can cook them, and you can bake them. Next. You can also preserve them. So here are some images of canning and pickling, freezing, and then of course, saving the seed. Next. And also what you would find in your backyard is what we call weeds, is actually food. And so you can see here, this is tumbleweed sprouts and dandelion flowers. And you can also eat the dandelion greens. So those are edible and actually provide a good source of nutrition. And so what I did was incorporated that into a salad. So just kind of give it an idea of some of those foods that we don't necessarily plant into our garden, but grow on their own, that those are still food and that we can eat them. Next. So for my family, gardening has really become an essential part of our lives. It gives us a space where we can really appreciate and respect Mother Earth and all the elements that it takes to create and sustain life. And so it's really important to us. And what it also has provided is given us the opportunity to take our health into our own hands. And so when we talk about the issues involving food sovereignty, food security, health, and even environmental sustainability, why not take the initiative to start in your own backyard? And so that's all I have for you guys today. Hanagam, thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for providing that beautiful presentation and sharing your personal connection. I was furiously scribbling notes because you shared so much knowledge, and so I'm sure that will come up again during some of our Q&A portion. Thank you. So I want to move on next to Ms. Angel Martinez, who is also a citizen of the Yavapai Apache Nation. And Angel, if you could please begin by briefly introducing yourself. And a note to those who are watching online, you'll notice that many of our participants, as part of their introductions, include introduction in their own Indigenous languages if they feel it's appropriate. And I think it's important to acknowledge that because, as Amanda pointed out, these are lifeways that have been handed down through generations, the language of ancestors. And so you'll notice that, and I just want to point that out and appreciate all of you who are sharing your native languages with us. So thank you, Angel.
Tagote, hello, my name is Angel Bates Martinez. I'm from the Yavapai Apache Nation, and I reside on the lower Camp Verde Reservation. And, I just want to let you guys know a little bit of part of me. So I was born in Safford, Arizona, and I was raised in Morenci. Back in 2006, I had relocated up here where my grandmother, the late Loretta Gibson Bates, had lived. And after her passing, it really took a hit to me because for me, knowing who my true identity was, I had a lot of challenges and obstacles there. Not being raised here on the reservation, not learning and understanding the Indigenous way of life. And so I'm a mother of 3 and I'm married as well. And I've been working with our Environmental Protection Department, and they've been, phenomenal on helping. And so they have a little nursery on the lower part of the Camp Verde Reservation, and it's right across our campground. And so what I'm learning initially is that the Camp Verde Reservation was one of the first reservations and one of our first holy grounds. And so just knowing that alone, that's a very powerful environment for me. And so working with the EPD, they provided me with a designated area inside the nursery. And go ahead and hit to the next slide. And so right here, replanting our roots back into our indigenous lands is very important, not only crucial for me, but crucial for everybody in our community and within our nation. And so you'll see right here is a little, a couple of photos of the area that I first was able to have. And that's where I was going to be growing fruits and vegetables. But during this time of COVID, I was actually granted another piece of land down there. And down there, we will be learning about our medicinal plants, our native plants, and really getting into our culture and our tradition. And go ahead and next. And so when we first started back in 2019, we created a little garden box that was for the three sisters, and they sprouted and it was amazing. The only problem we had was that our beans did not make it, but you could tell right here that you could see how big and how strong and amazing that they look. Reconnecting back into our indigenous culture is very important for our youth. Our youth is our new way of life. And so providing the space for them to come in and learn. Go ahead and Jenna to the next slide. You can see right here, and the kids really loved being out there. They loved, I had them planting, transplanting, I had them dropping seeds, and just to see them out there being in nature and being their own little human beings is what brings to life, you know, a project like this, because seeing them get in tune and get into the dirt and replanting their little roots back into our ancestors, you know, they teach me a lot of being present and being in the now. And so that really helps me focus on what my purpose is doing this garden, is reconnecting us back into our ancestors, pulling their guidance and learning how to incorporate our composting along with our indigenous roots. Go ahead to the next slide real quick. And so whenever we harvest our food, you can see right there, me and my daughter, she's been amazing at helping me and also learning. What we do is we really sit and we really connect with our plants. And so whenever we harvested our squash plants, I'm also learning as well that you can use the stems. And so what we did is we cleaned them and we used we cooked a small little meal and we ate them. And just the energy itself that the plants bring to you, you know, that medicine, their medicinal properties, whether it's herbal plants, whether it's, you know, fruits and vegetables, you know, that is what being indigenous is all about, you know, reconnecting, having that, you know, our senses really connect, our energy field connect with our land. And go ahead to the next one. And so, you know, when COVID really hit, you know, that really crashed not, you know, only society, but our little indigenous family, you know, it really, our mental and emotional states really fell. And so during that time, I provided a stay-at-home project for the kids just to get them active, you know, to get their mental and their emotional states to a higher level. Because whenever we shut ourselves out, stay inside, you know, we're only bringing harm to ourselves because we're not connecting with the four elements. We're not connecting to our true identity and our purpose here in life. And so really getting the children involved and reconnecting with our culture, I mean, it helps us understand our well-being on a different level. And so, you know, go ahead to the next one. And so, you know, this garden, you know, it is my baby. You know, I take my own personal experiences and I try to flip it out into a positive. You know, I'm not the only one dealing with problems out there. And so this little area, this is for you guys. I mean, this is for our people to really come down, be who they are in their true nature, feel, love, heal. And, that's what I've realized is that with this garden, going back to our traditional and cultural ways, it really gets us, it heals us. It heals the generational traumas that we've endured. It pulls us back to our true identity. And so, I'm not only doing this for the elders, for, me and my age group, but I'm also doing it more importantly, for our youth, because they are our next future. They're going to take care of us. They're going to take care of the land. So, if whoever's watching this, encourage your youth, make sure that their mind, make sure they're aligned with the peace, the love, and the harmony, and our culture and our tradition, because that is what's going to bring them to life. They're going to be creative. They're going to create a new foundation for a new future. So thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Angel. That is so beautifully stated. And I think we can add an additional R. I mentioned the 4 R's at the beginning, that respect and responsibility, reciprocity, and relationship. But you used another R word that's important, and that's that resiliency. So thank you for bringing attention to that important component. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Twyla Cazador to please share with us your personal connection to these topics. We know that you have a wealth of experience as a fluent language speaker, working on various aspects of food security and food sovereignty. And we'd really appreciate to hear from you, your thoughts on these topics. Thank you.
Don't know what out there. She Twyla Castro Gunze. My basket's gonna fall over to the side. It's getting windy here. Okay. I'm from the St. Carlos Apache tribe. I'm with the Cultural Project Division out here in St. Carlos. And what we're gonna talk about a little bit about this just happened. It wasn't like this. Something. I like that.
We have a winged relative making her presence known.
They actually did. This came out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
I know. Okay. So again, I'm with the Western Apache Diet Project out in St. Carlos, and I work with the 4 Western Apache tribes with I believe it's called Camp Verde, White Mountain, Payson, as well as St. Carlos. What I do is reintroduce traditional foodways back into the community. This is a project that began in 1993, when at that time our tribal chairman Harrison Talgo had decided, had really looked at the importance of retaining our culture using how you say, going through interviews with elders that were born at that time, that were in their 70s and 80s, that were raised by their grandparents, not their parents, but raised by their grandparents. So that was during a time of that transition of the reservation being developed here in San Carlos. And having that information was able to help retain a lot of that food knowledge that they carried with them, and is what sustained a lot of our people during that time of transition, as well as, I don't know how you can explain it this way, but I always talk about language, song, ceremony, prayer, and foodways. Our people carried these 5 seeds with them in that beginning, and I always go back to that beginning because a 10-year-old would know those things at that time. And that was in the 1870s. Today, we're looking today's generation, how many of us have our language speakers? How many of us have our people that know our languages, our songs, the ceremony of prayer, and our traditional foodways? How many of us carry those 5 seeds? So Mr. Talgo at that time understood the importance of the loss of those with the way things are advancing in today's world with technology, Christianity, development, things that are going on, also land loss, having no longer having access to traditional places where people once collected. And that's why many people are out there, really defending the land, the importance of why to defend the land. So going back to the project itself, I myself, with each interview that we're done, is extracting the food information and compiling it and putting into a database system along with our anthrobotanist. His name is Seth Couch. He's an amazing botanist, and very thankful to him for the opportunity to be able to do this type of work with him in the community as well as our elders. So with COVID, when it came, it took 50 of our elders away, and that's just with COVID. And you're looking at 50 elders that carried all this amazing, beautiful knowledge. And it hurts to continue the work in some way, but it's a work that's important to us and that needs to continue. And it's been very emotional for me to be doing what I'm doing because I'm very attached to a lot of these people that are not here no more. But today I'm carrying this basket, and I love using this basket because it's a representation of us as Apache people. People use this for many things, and I always like to go back to the food that are traditional food that were once put into these baskets during the ceremony, and the representation of them. There's different types of food like acorn, very common among Apache people, that represent longevity of life, strength, fertility. Same with the roots, the berries, and the nuts that are put into this basket during ceremony. That loss of knowledge is what's happening today, where you see this basket being placed with candy and sweets and jolly. In our beginning, this was placed with healthy nuts and berries and seeds that grew, in our land base. And they were poured among the girl like this way during her blessing, because we're blessing her with that same strength that allowed these food carry resiliency, strength, respect, honor, longevity of life, having prosperity also. So a lot of these are traditional foods symbolizes a lot of these importance of who we are today. So what I do is re-educate the community on those foodways and the purpose of why we fill these baskets. So I like using baskets. It's not to change the mind. It's not to how you say, it's just meant to educate people how things have rapidly changed within 100 years of our time, of how our ceremonies have changed, and how things that used to carry this basket are no longer carried in these baskets, but hoping through this education that we're able to refill these baskets with those traditional foodways again, and to bring back that how you say, that part of the ceremony, as far as respecting Mother Earth. We talk about respecting Mother Earth, but yet we fill these things with things that don't respect Mother Earth, and that's just a change. We do adapt to change, and that's just part of the change that is occurring in today's world. But we're still able to continue with the ceremonies. The ceremonies are very important to our identity and life. And a lot of these food that I'm talking about, the traditional food, it links us back to our beginning as Indigenous people. So for the young people to learn about these food is pretty amazing, especially acorn. I always reference back to emery oak acorn. If you are to look throughout the whole globe, you will not find it nowhere except in Western Apache Ria boundaries. And that's where our people are very rooted to, especially Apaches, are very rooted to the land, just like the emery oak acorn. The emery oak acorn is very symbolic to our life ways. And with the emery oak acorn, it is put in that basket. It is collected seasonally with family. It brings families together and it creates a beautiful community with our families to gather together. And a lot of it's for purposes, for ceremony, and also for a staple. And also looking back at the emery oak acorn, I'll always use the analogy of 3 acorn trees. The first acorn tree, probably in the mid 1800s, was a healthy, strong tree, which is true. That's before, how you say, climate change has really impacted us. Before developments have took away a lot of land, how mining has taken away a lot of these trees away, and how it has extracted a lot of the waters, groundwaters that support a lot of these trees. So you're looking at today's world, you don't see that healthy tree that carried all those 5 seeds: language, song, ceremony, and prayer, food waste. Today, you see a half dead acorn tree. A lot of it's because of development, mining, pollution, and how you say, overcutting in some areas for some people that love to use oak tree. It's the same with people. You look at drugs, alcohol, Christianity. Nothing wrong with Christianity, but Christianity has impacted a lot of people's influence about culture, tradition. What's the difference? And same with technology. This thing that we're talking on, this is taking a lot of our people's mind. You know, they're pretty distracted here than to be outside with the land. So we have that. And then you're looking at, I got one more minute. You're looking at 75 years from now. This is the truth. How many language speakers are we going to have? How many people are going to know our traditional food, our traditional song? How many people will we have doing our ceremony? You know, we just have to prepare and adapt for change. But with this project, we are able to capture a lot of the information and put it in a way where we can reteach a lot of this back into the community without it being completely lost, with like what COVID had done. COVID took 50 elders away, just like that. Something we never expected. So we're thankful for the project and other people that are doing similar types of work just to ensure our life ways is continued, to ensure that our existence continues. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, Asho, Ahia. And if you have any questions, my name is Twyla Casador. I'm with the Western Apache Diet Project out in San Carlos, Arizona.
Ahia Ashok, thank you, Twyla, so much. And from all of us, please accept our heartfelt condolences for the loss of those beautiful elders in the community. Again, as you mentioned, this project, this really a life's work project, about 28 years in the making. And we are so grateful that a knowledge keeper such as yourself has devoted so much of your time, not only your professional life, but your personal life, your emotional investment and commitment, your spiritual commitment to all this important work that you do. So again, please accept our condolences and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I do want to provide everybody with a quick update. One of our esteemed panelists, Ms. Thomasine Cardona, who is a citizen of the Yavapai Apache Nation. She also has served her community in an elected leadership capacity. She served a 3-year term as a tribal councilwoman for the Yavapai Apache Nation. She had an unexpected situation arise today, so she will not be joining us. However, she has kindly shared some slides. So we're going to show those at this time. I've had the benefit of having a brief conversation with Thomasine. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these slides. So as you can see, much like Twyla mentioned earlier, the importance of connection, ancestral connection, and realizing who we are as Indigenous people, where we come from, and that those life experiences of our ancestors, those joys as well as those traumas, impact us and influence many of our decisions today. So we see some traditional gathering activities. We see on the right More so, as Twyla mentioned, some of those forced policies, specifically that have to do with the idea that Indigenous lifeways and knowledge were somehow threatened the ability of Indigenous people to fully engage within the larger overculture of American settler society. And so various policies forcibly mandated that young children, sometimes as young as 4 years old, would be forcibly taken from their families and sent away, very often at long distances during the so-called boarding school era. So you can see some of that and some of those impacts. But in spite of all that, much like Twyla has mentioned, Angel mentioned, and Amanda mentioned, we have the benefit of thanking our ancestors for that resiliency. As Twyla mentioned, the importance of those 5 seeds of language, song, ceremony, prayer, foodways. And even though we realize that Indigenous language fluency for many, if not most Indigenous languages within the United States is in some sort of threatened or endangered status, all hope is not lost, because we have people like your esteemed panelists today who have dedicated their lives to reinvigorating and reviving these traditional lifeways. And along with that, it doesn't just come from maybe the act of gardening, but along with that comes that ceremony, that language, those prayers, those songs that Twyla mentioned. Is there another picture? That might be the only one.
That's the only one.
Okay, thank you. A couple things that I wanted to point out as we transition into more of the discussion portion, and I'm going to be asking 3 general questions, as I mentioned to our panelists at the beginning before we started today's webinar event. Each person may have more familiarity with a particular subject area than another. So you might hear more from one individual on a particular topic and more from another. But a couple things that really came to mind as I was listening to everyone is some of that, again, going back to one of those R's, that relationship. So both Amanda and Angel talked about the 3 sisters, referring to corn, beans, and squash. And as I mentioned at the outset, these terms of relatives and relationships, they do talk about literal relationships that people perceive as having with their land bases, with their foodways, but also to invoke some of the terminology that we might hear in more mainstream settings. So those 3 sisters, a term you might hear sometimes is permaculture. So permaculture talks about companion plantings. And so we have that in the example of the 3 sisters. I was really impressed by Amanda's sharing of pot gardening and how to really be respectful of another relative, of water, realizing that water is a finite quantity, especially in the arid, the very dry state of Arizona, and frankly, any state west of the Mississippi, and how certain methods can help reduce loss to evaporation. You know, we have this finite quantity of this important relative, and how it's so important that we have respect for our water relative. I was also really impressed by some of Angel's comments about connecting youth with plants and how important that is, getting youth out into the garden, how investing in our youth is so vitally important for future generations. And we know even from mainstream psychological studies that support that gardening, putting your hands physically in the dirt, is amazing for your mental health. All kinds of positive brain chemicals are released, serotonin, dopamine, and so on. And even you might be tempted, especially those of you who garden, to pick something straight from the ground and just blow it off or brush it off. You probably ate a little bit of dirt, but that's okay because it's good for you, because dietitians have noted that people who actually pick and eat food from their own gardens or from community-supported agriculture do ingest very small amounts of earth. And that shouldn't disgust you. That should inspire you to go and eat some dirt, because dirt has some positive beneficial bacteria. Some people, you might be familiar with macrobiotic diets, with eating foods that maybe are indigenous or readily found or in season, you know, depending on where you are in the world. And if you can pick something from the soil, you know, in your own homeland, you have that literal physical connection. You are then part of the earth. You are solidifying, taking into your own body, you know, the soil that your ancestors have connection with as well. But yeah, it actually helps your your gut biome, your microbiome in your body. So I thought that was really intriguing as well. And then something that Twyla shared that I also want to point out is how this important work, the Western Apache Diet Project, again, over 28 years in the making and continues to gain momentum, how this is amazing that this work is being compiled into this ethnobotanical database. Not only is this supporting and upholding Indigenous food sovereignty, but that data, it's also upholding the idea of Indigenous data sovereignty, because the community has ownership, control, access, and protection of that data. And especially in a digital age, we see how protecting data is very important. We see what happens when data gets breached. So it's so beautiful and inspiring to learn that all of these various projects are touching upon all of these topics, incorporating things, from maybe a more mainstream psychosocial or environmental or policymaking perspective, but doing it in ways that make sense to those specific communities, whether they are a Yavapai Apache Nation or they are San Carlos Apache tribes. So thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their personal connection to that. With that, I want to begin by asking the following question. And I know many of you have already touched upon elements of this, but I'd like to ask how certain political, environmental, and cultural aspects have played a critical role for you personally in terms of your reconnection. And your reconnection can be on an emotional level, a spiritual level, and even mentally to your own lived environment. So I want to put that out there.
Okay, Veronica, I can go ahead and address that question.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of want to flip that in a way where I want to say that the environment itself plays a crucial role in reconnecting, for me, who I am as an Indigenous person. And so, as I mentioned, in my presentation, gardening and being able to harvest the native foods and even medicines has really reconnected me and into a way that reconnected me to my ancestors and their teachings and the importance of, as Twyla speaks a little bit, speaks on culture. And so, for me, it just really enhances my self-identity and who I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else, if you feel comfortable sharing how these various aspects, whether they're environmental, the environment, the land itself, or culture, or even how maybe certain political realities have played a role in reconnecting you or reminding you of the importance of that reconnection to these food lifeways, these Indigenous foodways.
So with me, for as Indigenous people, the connection to our land is very crucial. So the disconnection we have suffered from over the decades from colonization, generational traumas, has shown throughout our communities. And by that, the overflow of alcohol, the overflow of, substance abuse, whether it's domestic violence, unfortunately, sexual abuse in that matter, and the continued self-sabotage that we have, over the years that we've experienced, the generational traumas that have been passed down, really our culture and our tradition really teaches my people and other people to be one with spirit, to be centered, and our well-being, in general, is very important. So when we reconnect with our culture and our land, that's been really hard because of, like I stated prior, the colonization that our elders had went through and the traumas that have been passed down. So as we learn to be one with ourselves and reroute into our culture, we also learn to be one with our environment as well.
Thank you, Angel. That is so beautifully stated. And I'm adding another R. You said the word reroute. I love that. it just connotes such a beautiful visual image of that, you know, when you're rerouting, it's a taproot. You're not going to be easily, you know, yanked out of the ground, so to speak. So thank you for that. Twyla, do you have anything that you would like to share on this topic, on this point? I know you've already shared so much, but is there any other aspect that you would like to discuss about this reconnection? Any other perspective?
Oh, yeah, I have my own personal perspective, and you're talking to a person that has been in recovery from addiction. And it's something that I experienced in the early age of life until I was older, which I carried for many years. But it was having my relatives and elders take me out to the land and reconnecting me to the land that helped wake up, I would say, a sleeping spirit inside of me. And I can honestly say I never felt love the way I did that day, to be embraced by Mother Earth and to feel that healing component begin. And it was a healing process that began from that day forward, was being out there, just personally reconnecting with the land. But not only the land, but the land where my family was from, Nuttastosin, which is out in the Old Art Mountain near the northern areas of White Mountain. That's where my mother's family is. But being in that landscape did something to me as a dead person. And being out there rooted me to who I am as an Indigenous person. And from there, things just start growing. Just like watching your garden grow, your plants grow, you're planting that seed. A seed was planted in me the moment I stepped on that ground. And from there, it was going back to relearning the language, listening to the songs, the ceremonies, prayer, food. All these things start growing, but it didn't happen immediately. It just takes time. This process, I use this personal same experience with people in recovery, and I share that same experience with them. I personally believe it's an effective tool that is not considered because it is not a Western ideology concept, but it is Indigenous concept. And our ancestors, I believe, personally have prayed in these land places for all of us at a time. So when we're touching these trees, gathering these plants, there are prayers also embedded that's not scientifically considered. So with those prayers, I honestly believe that when I was collecting these plants, there were prayers and songs and things that were part of that as I was eating.
Excuse me, Twyla, if you can please unmute yourself. Thank you.
So it nourished me physically, mentally, and spiritually, just bringing that holistic, real healing, Indigenous healing. And that's one thing I can say that our food does offer to our people and our community, is that healing that we are lacking to today's society. So thank you.
Thank you, Twyla, for offering those powerful words. And I think you touched upon something that's very important when we talk about restoring, there's another R, restoring our Indigenous communities, and how all of our relatives are important, including those who may be struggling with addiction and who may be at whatever point in their recovery journey, that all of us have something to share and something to invest, and we all bear that responsibility as well. So thank you for reminding us of that and providing that perspective. I've gone ahead and typed our next question for our panelists in our chat box, but I'm going to go ahead and read it so all those who are participating can know what it is. And the next question is, are there certain key areas? Maybe these areas are in the way of policy areas, whether at the federal level or the state level. Maybe there's public health policies or some other area. Are there areas where application of Indigenous knowledge, specifically Indigenous food knowledge, Indigenous food sovereignty, can help create positive change? How might this be applied maybe in other contexts, in other settings? Miss Angel, I'm going to pick on you. You already mentioned, about the importance of reconnecting with youth and some of the ways that your work, that you've been able to do that effectively. Are there other aspects where the knowledge that you've been able to learn and also teach and share with others, are there other areas or other arenas that you can see that this can be helpful, not only to Yavapai Apache Nation tribal citizens, but let's say to those non-Indigenous allies that we have?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. Whenever we connect with not only ourselves, when we open ourselves up and allow ourselves to heal, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, this garden, when we connect with the plants, when we consume these plants, a lot of that of what I'm doing is a lot of energy work itself. Going back to Twyla, her work makes her emotional, my work makes me emotional. Not only do I feel, within myself, but the other individuals, especially our youth, whenever I bring them out, you could totally, you could sense, you just have this sense of knowing what kind of level that they're on. So really working with them, with the plants, explaining to them, the medicinal properties of why we're growing, why we have to consume these, it all flows with how our bodies are within. What we eat is what we are. So, it's exciting to know and understand on a spiritual level that the line, just us as Indigenous people, on how we carry ourselves and our well-being when it comes to prayer, when it comes to eating, when it comes to outplanting, there's a purpose of why we're doing the things we're doing, because organically and holistically, that's what we have to do in order to take care of ourselves. So with a lot of, I will say, the government coming in, that there's a lot of battle and a lot of science, and it doesn't mesh together. So, a lot of the produce foods that we eat the processed foods that we eat, and our well-being when we're on a phone, a lot of what Twyla said, it takes away and it pulls. So to me, I feel like our well-being it's not as important as it should be. The way we talk to each other, the way we surround ourselves around things, whether it's a positive and a negative, all that really is an influence on who we are as a human being and how we live day to day. So this garden, it's not just talking about eating food and eating, vegetables and stuff like that. It's more of like a spiritual work and an opening for yourself to reconnect back into our culture. I mean, so much has been gone, for in my nation, we unfortunately we lack a lot of stuff. And that's proof right there of, how much pulled away we've gotten. And so the line of work that I'm doing, if you're gonna come out, expect, I want to see your full potential. I want to see you. I want to see, so and really getting that into the youth, I want them to feel alive. I want them to know that, this space, you could carry what you're doing here and you could take it home. You could create your own new life and your own new world just inside your home, and then you could provide it for your family. So, I really hope that this brings out a lot of people out to the garden, because, your well-being, my people's well-being comes first. And that's what I want them to do for themselves and for their family. So yeah, I mean, a lot of what I'm doing, there's just so much, and it's just so much of life that you're able to create within that life. So
Thank you so much, Angel. I tell you, these ladies have so much knowledge to share. I love something that you said, Angel, about what we eat is what we are. So I don't know if some of your projects are trying to do any type of fundraising, but I think that makes a fantastic bumper sticker, and I would love to purchase that. And I think you also raised an important point about approaching this work with intention. and very much from a prayerful standpoint. And that's something that I think in certain mainstream circles might be met with a little bit of hesitation, because very often, we are told to maybe keep that aspect of our lives to ourselves. But as you mentioned, that this really does inform all the work that you do, that this spiritual work, this energy work, this emotional and personal investment that you have is unavoidable, especially when we're talking about working with intention. So thank you so much for sharing those words. Amanda or Twyla, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Again, the question being how this knowledge can maybe create change in other areas. As Angel was speaking, I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great if there were built into the curriculum ethnobotany courses, across every entire school and every public school, even if it's a charter school or private school. What might that do for the well-being, the mental and emotional and psychological, spiritual well-being of our students? Would that maybe be a proactive way, not to be proactive instead of reactive in terms of addressing maybe some of the mental health issues that our students have, because they come from families that maybe there are some histories of a family environment that isn't always the healthiest. So I'm wondering, are there any other areas, either Amanda or Twyla, that you can think that could really benefit from some of this knowledge?
I totally agree about the education and the school system. We work with the different school districts throughout, different areas here. And one of the things I realized, there's nothing addressing that education in traditional food, tribal laws, tribal government. Yeah. There's nothing in their curriculum that is solid where it's part of the school system. They do have Apache language where they do learn a lot of the basic stuff, but to actually have, how you're mentioning, an ethnobotany class for students to learn from. So I work part-time with the St. Carlos High School, the culinary arts program. And during those years, I have done several surveys throughout the school system, and who was the most interested and who was the least interested. So we were able to create a graph. The person with the highest interest had a GPA of a 1.0. The person where the cutoff was a 2.2, because basically everybody academically was preparing themselves for a higher education of life and going on to universities and colleges and excelling. But that leaves that percentage of the population. What is there in the workforce? What is there in the workforce to help enable these individuals that want to learn about culture? What job opportunities are there in our community is there for them to help reintroduce a lot of these traditional foodways? Because realistically, on in the reservation where I live on, most of us are not going to leave the reservation. This is home. So how can we make home better? And one of the is using the tool in the education, having a tool in the education system to help them be happy with who they are, having them know that they can go and gather food for their families, having them have not just to support them, but just to have that knowledge, just to say, yes, they can take care of themselves. We don't have that. And that's what a lot of young people are missing, is that connection to the land and to their identity as Indab people, and having them be proud of who they are as an Indab person that's living on this, where we live. So we do have a beautiful home, but we're missing that, some elements in there, how you're mentioning. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Twyla, for your insight. I think it's really powerful that you mentioned that work at the high school, the San Carlos Culinary Program. And I think it also raises an important point of how we encourage our students to pursue, let's say, their academic future. And it's unfortunate, that students that might be on that so-called college prep track, for whatever reason, maybe are not encouraged to also consider participation in that type of program. So how do we encourage that all learners, wherever they are at, regardless of GPA, are treated as a whole entire person, as you said, as an in-depth person, living and working in their homelands. So thank you so much for providing that perspective. I wanted to ask, before I go on to our final question, Amanda, did you have any thoughts about this as well?
Yes, I do. Just kind of my thoughts and thinking some other areas when addressing this question. And, we talk about health, and we talk about the indigenous foods and how that can really, really bring for indigenous people, really bring back their health, because as Angel mentioned, the processed foods, we, and if I speak this in general, that many of our Indian communities, we suffer from diabetes and hypertension and other chronic diseases. And so, again, that gardening, that community gardening, that going out and harvesting those traditional foods can really bring back that health to our people, and that self-sufficiency. And, just working with agriculture, I really learned that our nation, the United States, and the way that they operate is through monoculture, which is they're planting one crop, in a huge area. And so, because there's no biodiversity, there's those insects, there's that are able to get into these plants, and, they can destroy crops. So now what they're having to do, or what they've been doing, is having to use pesticide, in order to manage that, control it, the insects that damage the plants. And so again, when we go into our markets, we're eating those foods, but with those chemicals on them, and it's bad for our health. And so I really appreciate Angel for bringing that in. And I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about that. And you mentioned, Veronica, about permaculture, and something that I've been learning is this is what Indigenous people have been doing for a long time. And so, when we talk about Indigenous knowledge, when we reach back and look to the way they used to farm, we can learn a lot about how we should be doing it today, that is best for our health, that is best for the environment itself, so I just kind of wanted to add a little bit of that in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And a couple things before we move on to our final question. First of all, since we're on the topic of education and our youth and how important that is, I'm going to go ahead and type in the chat box. Hopefully all panelists and attendees can see this. Recently, just within the past about 2 weeks or so, the Office of Indian Education, that's within the Arizona Department of Education, released its first time ever draft strategic plan regarding the education of Native students. There are approximately 57,000 Indigenous students in the state of Arizona. The Office of Indian Education for almost 2 years was a staff of 2. They hired a third staff person who began this past, I want to say late November, early December of 2020, and her specialty is on policy. They just recently hired a 4th person. So if you can imagine the monumental task and responsibility that for over 2 years, a staff of 2 had, and now very recently, a staff of 4 has, to educating our Indigenous youth, 50,000 Indigenous children, K through 12. So the Office of Indian Education, as I mentioned, released a draft strategic plan. I'm going to go ahead and drop in that link right now in the chat box. It is available for public comment. We encourage you, and the reason I say we is I had the pleasure and privilege of being part of the team that helped compile this data and draft the strategic plan. We want you to be highly critical of it. You're not going to hurt our feelings. We have to start somewhere. It is certainly far from perfect. But as we're talking about this, the importance of language and culture, ethnobotany, and so on, and the various areas that it can be applied, especially when we're thinking about our youth, I really appreciate if you can take a look at this and provide your thoughts because this is really important. So before we went on, I wanted to note that. I also want to note we do have 2 questions in our Q&A. I'm going to save those until the very end. But before we move on to the third question, I'd like to actually call upon Glory. Glory, you are involved in several projects, and I'd like to ask if you want to just briefly share with us a little bit.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thank you for your question. And yes, so again, I myself I'm on the Red Road, and actually being on in recovery has allowed me to, as Twyla mentioned, like really be in touch with the 4 sacred elements of life, and the Mother Earth, the water, the air, and fire. And through that experience, I've really, like, that's helped me heal, like really connect with the Creator, and the importance of my ancestors, and the land that we live on here, and our history here. And so through that journey, I've met a lot of teachers, and still learning. I'm still learning, and well, everyone learns every day, just open mind. And so with that journey, we've been doing a lot of prayer healing for our community, for our people. And through that, I was able to work with some people that I really highly admire, and with our culture department, and also to bring a sweat lodge to our community. And so it's still in the process, so I've not announced anything or anything like that. So there's still creators still doing some work with that. And also we do a lot of I do a lot of I guess, like, I'm a recovery activist in our community. So I do Red Road 12-step groups in our community, and a huge part of that is our well-being, for our physical, our emotional, our spiritual, and our mental. And so yeah, it's just that's got, with the pandemic, we had to adjust to that. And so we have virtual meetings throughout the week, 6 times a week, and or 6 times out of the week, and so we're slowly starting to get back in person as things start opening up for us. So, but yeah, that's what I do. My daughter here, Alana, she's recently been certified for a fire starter for the youth, to bring Red Road healing 12 steps to our youth here in our communities. So yeah, that's the journey we're on right now. Thank you. I hope Hanukkah.
Thank you so much, Glory, for sharing that. And we're excited to see, as things continue to evolve, to learn more about your important work in ways that all of us who are participating today can support it. So our final question that I want to offer for our panelists for their feedback is, any additional insight, maybe something else, listening to your colleagues on this panel, that has jogged your memory, that you think is that it could be a challenge, or could maybe be some other type of success that you want to share with us regarding tribal communities' lifeways, regarding Indigenous food sovereignty. Any final thoughts that you'd like to offer, whether they're environmental related, political, economic? Thank you.
So just real quick, I noticed, like, with our nation, the increase of land sale, and federal funding, that really threatens our tribal way of community living. The land sale and separation. It's bad enough that we are the Yavapai Apache Nation. They have 7 different small communities compared to the big map of our general area. And so, with that, I feel it brings a lot of division, a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of misunderstanding. And so, and with that follows anger, resentment, retaliation, and the only ones that are profiting, I feel, and I mean, Amanda, I mean, you're on council, so please, if there's anything that you could help, bring to light, please. I just feel like the older ones are the higher ones are profiting a little bit more because it's bringing a lot of separation, like I said, and division within our communities. And that brings a lot of mental and emotional problems as well. And that reconnection and identity that really boils a lot of blood in our community. And so, that right there, I've noticed, and I'm pretty sure in other nations as well, that happens. But I feel that we should really connect with the land that we have. And instead of letting, the greed and the money coming in, really, we have everything that we actually really need, as long as we know how to preserve our water, clean it and make sure it's clean, and our food. I mean, we're in abundance in a lot of things that we already have. Why are we adding more to what we don't need when we have everything, within the culture and our tradition? And so, that's kind of what I've experienced, with federal funding when it comes to our food bank, that we still have to qualify for things, and if we don't meet those qualifications, then we're not able to get a box, and there's some individuals that don't know how to plant, they don't know how to garden, they don't even understand, the concept of soil, making sure what we spray, like herbicides, pesticides, what we spray in our soil, we plant those seeds and it grows. So we're not only ingesting the earth, but we're ingesting those chemicals as well. So really going back organically and being sovereign as a nation, that's really the key important of what I know our nation and probably other nations need as well.
Thank you, Angel. Amanda or Twyla, your thoughts?
All right, Veronica, I can go. Yeah, I really appreciate, what Angel has stated. And, we speak about education, right? We were speaking about education earlier, and I really think that's where we start, so when I look at my tribe and I think about, I look at the issues that we have, I think it really starts from creating that awareness and how are we going to address those? And it starts with that education. And something I wanted to mention real quick was that, and I'm sure most of us know this, but maybe for those who don't, who may be joining us, it's important to acknowledge that, our ancestors, those speaking Yavapai and Apache here in the Verde Valley, they were forcefully removed from our land. And so when that happened, it disrupted a lot of our ability, so we were forcefully marched down to San Carlos, where we were living in camps. And the only food source we had was those processed foods, those canned foods, and so that's where our grandmothers, our grandfathers had to work with what they had, and in order to survive. And so when they so again, that created that disruption of that connection to the food, that ability to be able to grow our own food, to go out and hunt for our food. And so now, when I think of my tribe, that kind of really disrupted not just that part, but a lot of our culture and our language and our way of life. And so now we have to come back and relearn those things. And I see in our community that there are individuals out there that are really passionate. We speak of Angel, Glory, Alana. There are other elders out there. There are other tribal citizens that are really making efforts to bringing that back to our tribe. And for me, I'm very community oriented, and I really see us as individuals being able to have our own sense of self-direction and self-sufficiency to go out and make that change ourselves. And that's where I see happening, individuals being able to want to take on that responsibility and bring that back, that awareness and that education back to our communities. And so for me, I think it's kind of in our hands, right? It's in our hands to want to be able to relearn, to reconnect, and to share that and pass that on to our children. And I see a lot of that happening now. It's starting slow, but again, as I mentioned, the women, I really see them as bringing back that healing to our tribes, and it's happening. So I'm really hopeful, and and when I want to share, it's just that I know that the people themselves have that power, and that we can ourselves, bring back that healing, whether, not just the women, but also men too. And, Twyla speaks about song and ceremony and traditional foods, and it's coming back. It really is. It's taking some time, but I'm seeing it happen. And to speak, as a leader, just to always have that in mind, and to think that, anything that we do, whether it's the political decisions, that we're looking forward to the future, that we're making decisions that are going to benefit our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. And, and I hope that, Angel, Glory, Alana, Twyla, that we're bringing those back to our people. Again, it just really starts with us as individuals in our community wanting to make that change. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Let me unmute myself. I was on mime for a minute. Thank you, Amanda. Twyla, do you have any thoughts about some of these challenges? I know you mentioned earlier the realities of climate change, of land development, of mining, of pollution, of overcutting. You mentioned those challenges. Do you have any other words that you'd like to share with us on that point, whether they're related to challenges or suggestions that you might have to address some of those challenges?
Okay. For one is, I'm going to just talk firstly about our Forest Service here, or here in St. Carlos Forestry Program. They're doing an amazing job incorporating traditional knowledge into what they're doing with the landscape. And they're working with different universities in really educating our future, forestry leaders, how to implement and use traditional knowledge in maintaining and supporting the land without over extracting it, without overcutting, but just using that traditional ecological knowledge to maintain the land, not just for economic resources, but also for that traditional resource of access to healthy food that are out there in the landscape. Applying both world knowledge to taking care of the land. And that's something that St. Carlos Apache tribe has been doing very well with their forest manager that just retired. His name is D. Randall, and he's been doing a phenomenal job in reintroducing traditional methods in maintaining the landscape. I believe that our kids are real key into making things happen, our youth in the education system, and how we are teaching them, what we are teaching them, how do we apply this type of knowledge into the school system so young people can catch on early, not, like, I can't say I'm old, but I'm getting there. But just for young people to have access to that type of knowledge is very key in seeing a healthy community grow. I've taken young people out. I'm going to just speak real 3 minutes on this thing. Okay, I take young people out to different landscape where their origins are from, where their clans are from. And some of these landscape, oh great. Okay, some of these landscape is far away. So I take these youth that were very engaged in gang activities and drugs and wanting to be, say, drug dealers, but taking them out to the land and reintroducing them to the land, learning about the history, the historical trauma that has occurred, but also collecting the food source that are in that area. I had this young boy, after a whole session of listening to the story from an elder, after they had finished reading a book that week, to be out there in that land and actually stand in a landscape where massacre had occurred, which is Camp Grant Massacre. And in this place, you know, he's standing looking at this landscape, but he had no idea who was there, what was there. And so a story was told to him about the survivors of this place. And he was told about a specific story that occurred. And the man looked at him and told him, you know, that person we're talking about is the child that survived one of these massacres, and told the young man that was your great grandmother. And this is the respect that you give to this woman that survived this massacre. Something happened magically, I can say, to this young man. He did not look at it the way he looked at it when we first got there. And this is a boy that doesn't know his language. And this is a boy that had no intention of going to school. 3 years of college, has a job in the city today, relearning his own language. It gave him purpose. It rooted him to his identity, where he is something transformed. And just seeing that personally have made me change my method of teaching. And what should I stress more and what should I stress less of? Do I use academia, or do I use what we're used to? Traditional knowledge, which is passed down through, how you say, oral tradition, oral language, oral history. And it's something that's not written, but something that's spoken, something that's engaged in, something that we use in a communal way, where we are interacting with each other. And that's what's missing from a lot of this education system, is that type of traditional knowledge. Going back to that traditional way of learning was orally and was hands-on. But for this young man, was just seeing a part of his history in front of him. And it just impacted the way he is today. He's a grown-up man now. Very proud of this individual. And that's what the work I do, is taking out young people from various landscapes to their land and reintroducing them back to the land. Maybe it may not complete a whole thing, but it gives them purpose, and it gives them that root that they're all missing. Many people are not connecting. They give them a sense of identity and being proud of who they are and knowing their history. So thank you again.
Thank you, Twyla. I mean, such powerful words that you shared about that reconnection, that rerouting, how it's restorative, and it even helped you to reevaluate some of your methods. So I think, as we learned today, we are all in this process, but throughout we're emphasizing that, again, those 4 R's that we mentioned at the outset. So I know we are quite over time, but I don't want to overlook the 2 questions. Well, one is a comment and one is a question. I'm going to read the comment first, and this is from Vicki Anderson, who stated, the nutritional component of pre-contact foods are so important in helping disease, mental strength, and health and happiness, and realizing that it heals you and restores your identity. Thank you, Vicki. And then we have about a 3-part question from Summer Dunn. So I'm going to, once I read this, ask our panelists if you have some quick words to share on this. Summer shares, I help to run a school garden program in Prescott. I'm of European ancestry, but I have a deep appreciation for my native neighbors' culture and history. I would like to plant a 3 Sisters garden with my students. Do any of you panelists feel that this would be an example of cultural appropriation? If not, do you have any books or resources that you would recommend that I share with my students to give them historical and cultural background on a 3 Sisters garden? So I will open that to our panelists now.
I can go ahead and address that. Yeah, so definitely, I think a 3 Sisters garden would be an example of culture appropriation in the setting when it comes to Indigenous. The way that we grew, you mentioned companion planting. And I know there's actually one more sister, and I want to say it was the black walnut, I believe. But what you can do is go online, and the knowledge is there online. So that would be an amazing opportunity for students to learn, about the Indigenous practices of how we planted back then. So just a short, brief answer.
Thank you, Amanda. And I think maybe in the context of Summer's question, when we say cultural appropriation, are we saying it when you said you think it's an example of cultural appropriation? Do you see that as something with a negative value, or more so a cultural adoption, let's say, of an Indigenous foodways knowledge?
Yeah, well, more like of I guess, in a cultural teaching, I would say, something that has been passed down to us as a practice of growing our food, if that may be a little bit better answer.
Thank you for that. I think where our panelist is trying to make sure that not trying to be maybe unintentionally offensive. Twyla, can you offer your thoughts on that?
Excuse me?
Can you offer your thoughts? We have a panelist asking, would it be appropriate, would it be okay to plant a Three Sisters garden, or would it be maybe a negative example of cultural appropriation? Because this person is working with youth and would like to bring that type of knowledge into the classroom. What are your thoughts and opinions on that?
It's actually, for me personally, it's fine as an educational tool. It helps create that awareness, especially for young people, to understand how culture is incorporated with agriculture, and also looking at your local resource right there where her community is from. Look at the culture center that you have in Prescott. Talk to the elders that are in that community. They have a lot of shared knowledge there. And also talking with the local farmers. Sometimes people on the other side of the fence really understand a lot that has been applied and not applied, and what techniques work, what doesn't work, and also looking, just, I would say, reference to your local resources that are within your area. But it helps create an understanding in for young people.
Thank you, Twyla. Angel, your thoughts?
Yeah, for like the Three Sisters, on a spiritual and energy level, definitely whenever you're out there teaching them about the Three Sisters, they are the three companion sisters. So really incorporating that into their own personal life, whether they're at home, whether they're in the garden, I feel is very, very important, because teaching them how to be centered when it comes to situations, or even dealing with individuals, that really helps them to understand, be good to all living things, be compassionate about who you interact with, and what you do when it comes to working together as a team.
Thank you for that, Angel. And I've gone ahead and typed the name of a noted author. Actually, I'm going to put it for all panelists and attendees. Her name is Robin Kimmerer. She is a citizen of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and she wrote an amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Robin Kimmerer is a professor at the State University of New York. I'm trying to recall which campus she's at, but she focuses, she's within the College of Environmental Science and Forestry at SUNY College in Syracuse, New York. And she's also the founding director on the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. So for any of you who are maybe seeking resources, please go ahead and feel free to look up Dr. Robin Kimmerer. As I mentioned, she's a citizen of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And I've had the pleasure of meeting her many years ago, back in 2008, and have been very impressed with her humility and her generosity of spirit in sharing knowledge. We are now at the end of our program. And so before we say goodbye to each other, I first, once again, want to offer my heartfelt thanks to all of our panelists who've participated today, who've shared your wealth of knowledge. I also want to thank our co-sponsors for this event, the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance and the Sustainability Alliance. And to properly close out this afternoon session, I'm going to again request assistance from Twyla Cazador and also Ms. Nolene in providing a closing prayer for us at this time. And again, if you would like us to stand, we are happy to do so. Thank you.
You don't have to stand. Let's all pray. Go non, you don't need a lot of cars. You go non. So the change you know this Sunday or walk over your tea in the Veneran in the walk and meal. And take your non, you don't it done one large. Diro watch and out neck going non. Don't depart and yell. How you not a this Sunday or walk and Nichero I be cut around me. The way they would do let Chogasha the June is funny, or what picture out all walk out now. The one little on you, but yan notes always Kaira. I know Chero on it at a tihula. Dinity son at a jigula yet tea G be cut around Nico, away Ichero all. And I hear egg I went non shita, a short let takun shlini. It was on linear around car window the linear. So unique gun choy la tiro waha gerigzation it done in ne be done in ne how to other and he china another click I went non don't enan yere ana he ek non shoot.
Ahaya Ashok, thank you so much again for those beautiful words. And thank you again to all of our participants who were able to stay the entire time. We invite you to please look out for your email. You are going to receive a follow-up email. Full lineup of events can be found at www.nazcca.org/Earth Week. And again, that will be sent to you. So please be on the lookout for your email. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon and have a blessed week.